Welcome to the 9th lecture of the course on Sociological Perspectives on Modernity. Okay. In the last two lectures, we have started Max Weber's interpretation of modernity, and we have discussed certain prefatory remarks about Weber's interpretation of modernity. I mean, we have discussed Weber's theoretical positions and methodological writings, which are extremely important to make sense of his contributions to the debates on modernity. Okay. We have discussed, I mean, within sociological modernism, I mean classic statements of sociological modernism in the works of Marx and Weber. We have already completed Marx, and in the last two lectures, in the 7th and 8th lecture, we have discussed Weber's theoretical positions and methodological writings. I mean, how they are usually characterized as effecting a reconciliation between positivism and neo-Kantianism. I mean, positivism indicates the supremacy of sciences over non-sciences. Positivism suggests that science is the most objective thing known to human species, whereas positivism suggests that our knowledge is absolute. Science must be accorded an esoteric value system in contradistinction with other areas of human activity or creativity. Okay. I mean, we have already discussed how positivism suggested that science is distinct from all areas of human activity or creativity because it possesses a method unique to it, that there is only one method, that there is only one single method common to all sciences irrespective of their subject matter, that is methodological monism, that the method of science is the method of induction, that the hallmark of science lies in the fact that all scientific statements must be systematically verifiable, that is systematic verifiability. Okay. We have also discussed how that positivism maintains that there must be a dichotomy between fact and value. I mean, facts are value neutral, whereas values do not have any factual content. The relationship between observation and theory is unilateral in the sense that theories are observation dependent, whereas observations are theory independent. In other words, observation leads to theory, but the converse is not true. I mean, theory does not lead to observation. Okay. Such absolutist, idealist characterization of science was questioned by neo-Kantian school of thought. Okay. What does the neo-Kantianism suggest? No, our knowledge of the natural world as well as the social world is not absolute, is relative, is partial. Okay. It is not subjective. It is not objective, rather it is subjective. That is why our knowledge of the social world is a constructed one, which involves selection and interpretation of multiple data systems. And we do not simply remain at the level of interpretation of multiple data systems. Okay. As Weber said, that no, we also aim at interpretation of interpretations. Okay? That is very important. Okay? Then Weber's methodological writings and theoretical positions are usually characterized as effecting a reconciliation between positivism and neo-Kantianism, we have already discussed. At times, Weber rejects certain viewpoints of neo-Kantians, that the cultural sciences are exclusively concerned with the uniqueness of their objects of study and that the category of causality is inapplicable in them. At the same time, Weber was committed to neo-Kantian insistence on the methodological peculiarities of the cultural sciences. I mean, by foregrounding the distinction between natural sciences from cultural sciences. For Weber, these methodological peculiarities centered around two related concepts, namely value relevance and interpretative understanding. For Weber, the cultural sciences differ from the natural sciences in the distinctive role of valuations in the formation of concepts, I mean in the distinctive type of knowledge involved in them. Then another third area of methodological differences was thought by Weber, okay, to be the use of idealizations within quote, idealizations in the cultural sciences. Okay, we have discussed this. Then Weber made another leap by defining sociology as a science. He was nevertheless very much aware of the ambiguities involved in the term sociology, but he defines sociology as a science which attempts the interpretive understanding of social action in order thereby to arrive at a causal explanation of its course and effects. And that is why we have discussed how an exposition of Weber's methodological positions and theoretical positions can usefully proceed with an analysis of each of the concepts and contrasts involved in this definition of sociology. I mean, three important components: sociology is a science, sociology is a science which attempts interpretive understanding of social action, and thirdly, a causal explanation, I mean cause and effect relationship. Then we have discussed the concept of social action, I mean the characterization of sociology in terms of the understanding and explanation of social action, which involves two important contrasts. When I say understanding, I refer to neo-Kantianism. When I discuss explanation, I refer to positivism. Okay. What kind of two important contrasts? Important contrasts between the paradigmatic objects of sociological knowledge for Weber on the one hand, and supra-individual social entities on the other. What are those paradigmatic objects of sociological knowledge for Weber? Those individual social actions, their meanings and causes. And what are those supra-individual social entities for Weber? States, institutions, classes, collective consciousnesses and so on, whose existence is supposed in much sociological theory and also everyday thinking about social relations. Okay. And Weber was in fact though methodological individualist position Weber undertakes, okay, Weber does not actually deny the existence of such supra-individual social entities, but argues that for interpretative sociology, these supra-individual social entities must be treated as solely the resultants and modes of organizations of the particular acts of individual persons. In contradistinction with what Marx said, it is I mean for whatever social change that we witness, it is because of the changes in the modes of production by collective social action, not individual persons for Marx, but for Weber it is the resultant and mode of organization of the particular acts of individual persons. That is why his position is often regarded as methodological individualist, which involves the claim that so far as collectivities may be said to have characteristics independent of the individuals which make them up, those characteristics are to be explained in terms of individual actors and their actions. Okay? Then we have discussed methodological individualism, which refers to theoretical positions holding that adequate sociological accounts necessarily involve reference to individuals, their interpretations of their circumstances, and the reasons and motives for the actions those individuals take. Suppose for Marx, such action, such individual social action or collective action by no means necessarily follows from, I mean for Marx it necessarily follows from the sharing of a common class situation, but not for Weber. For Weber, such action by no means necessarily follows from the sharing of a class situation. It may be status, it may be party, it may be market, and so on. Okay? Then we discussed interpretative understanding by Max Weber. I mean, interpretive sociology refers to a variety of forms of sociology united by an emphasis on the necessity for sociologists to grasp or understand or interpret actors' meanings, subjects' meanings. Okay? It can legitimately interpret the course of action in terms of concepts such as the state, classes, and so on, without commitment to any of these, any of such entities. That is why for Weber, interpretative understanding refers to a method that emphasizes on the importance of understanding of intentional human action, instrumental rationality, goal oriented social action. Okay? Okay? Then such understanding, that interpretative understanding of social action, such understanding in German it is called Verstehen, which Weber used. Verstehen refers to a method of elucidating the motivations for action which did not prelude the sociologist making generalizations from the data. In a nutshell, whilst there is a general commitment to empathy, I mean understanding the need of the other, understanding the role of the other, and understanding from the actor's point of view, the research that follows from interpretation or multiple interpretations is so varied as to be difficult to categorize as a school of thought. There may be multiple schools of thought. Okay? That was the view of the Verstehen school of thought in Austria. Maybe, perhaps because the meaning of interpretation is itself subject to interpretation, aiming at interpretation of interpretations, I mean aiming at multiple interpretations. Okay? That is why Verstehen is not a method at all for Weber, but an objective, a goal, an achievement. It is a distinctive type of knowledge which may be achieved by a variety of methods or no method at all. For Weber, the concept of Verstehen refers primarily to the spontaneous and immediate recognition of acts and their meanings in everyday life. For according to Weber, interpretative understanding of social action has two components, two parts, two elements. What are those elements? Interpretation of the textual and linguistic meaning of a cultural product. We have discussed in the context of any festival. That is why I gave you the example of Mekhla Sari in Assam. These are cultural products and certain textual and linguistic meanings are attached to it. On that is the, I mean interpretation of the textual and linguistic meaning of a cultural product on the one hand, and value interpretation which does not involve evaluation of selection evaluation of action or product, but involves selective conceptualization of the object in relation to some value on the other. What do we mean by such value? It may be social value or aesthetic value or cognitive value. Okay? When I say value interpretation or values, it is a combination of cultural relevance and meanings that they generate as well as that which are attached to it. Okay? When I say selective conceptualization of the object, what is the basis of selection? Why, how do we select? Selection is based on cultural relevance, and values in the modernist construction, in the modernist construal, okay, for a social scientist, for a sociologist, is always an object of study. Hence, interpretative understanding of social action, when I say there are two types of interpretative understanding of social action. One is direct understanding, alternatively known as observational understanding, and the other indirect understanding or alternatively known as explanatory understanding. Okay? Then what is direct understanding or observational understanding of social action? It is based on the interpretative understanding of action. It involves a method or a strategy. What is that method or strategy? No, that method or strategy refers to the imaginative identification, which is primarily to be spontaneous and immediate recognition of the acts and their meanings in everyday life. I mean, this, then what is this imaginative identification? No, this imaginative identification is processed through rule governed strategy within a shared culture, which is possible only when both observer and observed share culture. What is then that rule governed strategy within a shared culture? I mean, rule governed shared culture? No, rule governed shared culture is based on relevance, acceptability and elegance. Okay? We have discussed this. Okay? Then what we just now discussed, that this imaginative identification is processed through rule governed strategy within a shared culture, which is possible only when both observer and observed share culture. But if they do not share culture, then what will happen? Then observer may give a different meaning, or observed should get socialized into the culture that the observer wants to study. Okay? That will give some different results. I mean, it may give us some unreliable data, invalid data. Okay? Then sharing culture, shared culture, rule governed strategy within a shared culture we have discussed. But what is culture for Weber? For Weber, culture refers to the totality of real objects to which we attach generally acknowledged values or complexes of meaning constituted by values, in contradistinction with Marx. Marx said the rational is the real. For Weber, no, culture is the totality of real objects to which we attach generally acknowledged values or complexes of meaning constituted by values. In this sense, culture consists of all those items produced by human beings for the sake of value ends. I mean, both value rational social action as well as goal oriented social action. Okay? Okay? I mean, such understanding, such Verstehen comprises two things. One is imaginative identification, which is useful but not an essential condition for a meaningful social action. Okay? What is a meaningful social action? We will discuss when we will be discussing typology of social action by Weber. Okay? And we must be able to recognize the rational connection between means and ends. We must be able to recognize the rational connection between substantive rationality on the one hand and instrumental rationality on the other. And while coming to indirect understanding of social action or explanatory understanding of social action, Weber suggested that explanation must be adequate at the level of meaning as well as explanation must be adequate at the level of statistical generalizations. Then what is the basis of adequacy? Who will determine what is adequate, what is not adequate? No, adequacy is based on generalization and generalizations are based on experience. He comes back to, I mean, if meaning is represented by, if meaning is represented by or meaning represents neo-Kantian position, then statistical generalizations represent positivistic school of thought. Okay? But when Weber suggests that no, adequacy is based on generalizations and generalizations are based on experience, then he becomes a positivist, an empiricist, an inductivist. Okay? This is the thing. Okay. Then we have discussed there is a probability that a particular action often occurs in the same way. If motives are the antecedent, then social action will be the consequent. We have also discussed motive, how multiple motives can lead to a similar and same kind of social action. I mean, motive, when Weber said, he refers to a complex subjective meaning which seems to the actor herself or himself or to the observer as an adequate ground for the conduct in question. And the central dimensions of Weber's analysis are that economic, religious and power relations are crucial sociological explanations. Thereby, he made three types of economic phenomena, namely economic phenomena, economically relevant phenomena and economically conditioned phenomena. Within economic phenomena, he gave the examples of institutions deliberately created and used for economic ends, I mean market. Economically relevant phenomena, he referred to legal and religious phenomena which are not primarily economic, but have consequences which are economic in nature in certain circumstances. And economically conditioned phenomena, Weber refers to stratification systems and the state which are not directly the economic phenomena, but they are affected in some way by economic phenomena. By doing this, he suggested that economy and religion cannot be separated in our day to day life and so on. Okay. Now, in this lecture, what we are going to do against this backdrop, I always try to recapitulate whatever we have discussed in the last lecture. Okay. Now, we are going to characterize, we have to capture Weber's interpretation of modernity through the lenses of four central philosophical and political foundations of modernity, okay? Namely holism or totality, reflexivity, rationality and social movements. Okay? Now, let us start with holism or totality. Let me tell you that Marx is not a sociologist in the disciplinary sense, for the simple reason is that he is not an academic person. Rather, Weber is or rather became a sociologist because he is living and working as an academic at the point where sociology is developing as a separate discipline in the American tradition. Okay. Indeed, Weber moves from the study of law, political economy and history to an identity as a sociologist. And this is and such shift has significant consequences. Whereas Marx, the activist thinker, is working towards a global theory which renders the old disciplinary division of labor obsolete, outdated, by showing the interrelation between the different spheres of life. Weber sets out to define sociology as different from other humanities and social sciences, as and restricts its scope in theory, at least in theory. Okay? More perhaps than any comparable sociological theorist, to the point where we are to hold ourselves to his explicit statements, it would be impossible to describe him as a holist. Okay. There are I mean the way Marx extended the scope of collective consciousness, intellectual and political consciousness, which has contributed to the debates on modernity, okay, makes him actually, in fact, he extended the scope and ambit of modernity. That is why he is often referred to as a holist. His explanations are often referred to as a holist, as holistic explanation. Whereas if you look at Weber, who sets out to define sociology as a science that aims at interpretive understanding of social action, okay, in order thereby to arrive at a causal explanation of its course and effects. Okay. That is why he tried to branch sociology out from other spheres of other disciplines within humanities and social sciences, and thereby he attempted to restrict the scope and ambit of sociology, at least in theory, and more perhaps than any comparable sociological theorist, to the point where we are to hold ourselves to his explicit statements. I mean, it would be impossible to describe him as a holist. Okay. There are a number of steps in this narrowing of the jurisdiction of sociology. Firstly, Weber takes what is known as a methodologically individualist position, as we have already discussed. Please try to understand that methodologically individualist position, when I say, I refer to at least three components. I mean, actors, individual actions, to the circumstances against the backdrop of which individuals undertake those actions, and thirdly, the motives and reasons for which individuals undertake such action. Okay. These three things are important. Okay. Then, when I said firstly Weber takes what is known as a methodologically individualist position, in other words, Weber assumes that all statements about the human world can in principle be reduced to statements about individuals and aggregates of individuals. When Weber talks about individualism, okay, he always emphasizes on only individuals actions, individual actors, individual action in context, in perspective, I mean in certain circumstances, and the reasons and motives of such individual action. I mean, for Weber, he treats individuals and as primary, not the relationships between individuals. For Marx, an individual is not very important, rather the relationships that individuals forge in society, okay, assume greater significance for Marx. But for Weber, I mean, Weber treats individuals rather than relationships between individuals as primary. Okay. For Weber, relationships between individuals is not as important as individuals themselves. A consequence of such analysis, okay, I mean, I mean, uh, I mean, if it implies treating individuals rather than relationships between individuals as primary, a consequence of this is that these relationships depend on active construction, that they do not necessarily apply globally, and that even where they do apply, they can best be described in terms of the probability that the relationship or process in question will apply in a particular case. Okay. Secondly, why why Weber's statements cannot be considered holistic explanations, precisely because Weber restricts the scope and scope and ambit of sociology as a discipline to the study of meaningful social action. Putting it succinctly, to the action of these individuals insofar as their action is oriented towards each other and insofar as they attach meaning to it. Okay. If this is so, then it involves an exclusion of biology, of the unconscious, potentially of some economic relationships and so on. And this position is stated in detail in the opening section of Weber's work on basic concepts in sociology. So Weber is not a straightforward holist. Weber undermines both the possibility of general explanations and the scope and ambit of sociology and the social itself to a very great extent. However, this theoretical refusal of holism is undermined by a number of features of his thinking. Okay, this is very important. Okay, when you look at different types of things, you will find that Weber is also a holist, but where we are trying to challenge that which is a modern phenomenon, that I must be able to interrogate or I will perish. Civilization must interrogate or perish. Okay? Modernity must interrogate or there is no significance of modernity. Right? Modernity, the way multiple modernities, alternatives to linear view of modernity, alternatives to European modernity, if you look at, okay, you will find that we always tend to question, we always tend to interrogate the hitherto existing ideas. Okay. In this sense, we argue that Weber is not a straightforward holist. Okay. But it does not imply he is not absolutely a holist. No, he is not a straightforward holist. Okay. Through different parameters, his works also can be considered holistic explanations. Okay. Considered to have holistic explanations. Okay. If this is so, then we must link what is the rational position that Weber took. Okay. The first and most obvious of these questions is this, that there is a tension between the statement that we start from individuals rather than relationships, and the statement that what we are interested in is the way whose individuals orient their in the way those individuals orient their action to each other, in other words their interaction. That is what we have discussed just now. Weber always treats individuals as primary, not the relationships between individuals or among individuals. Okay. If this is so, the effect of this if the effect of the way Weber treated individuals as primary becomes clear when we consider the second element of Weber's definition of sociology, that it is not just about social action, but about meaningful social action. Okay. Weber proceeds to develop a categorization of the types of meaning which can be attached to social action. What is that? Categorization. Okay. This categorization which appears in some senses as a general statement of the kinds of ways in which people can relate to one another, or in other words precisely the kind of general statement about social relationships that methodological individualism finds suspect. Then what are these the categorization of the types? No, these types of social action reappear in a number of forms, for example, as the different ways in which a given power structure can find legitimacy. Okay. For Weber, there are 4 types of social action: traditional social action, affective or emotive social action, value oriented social action, okay, and goal oriented social action or goal rational social action. What is that? What do we mean by these 4 types of social action? Okay. Traditional social action refers to the fact that meanings of action are related simply to habit and custom and are described by Weber as coming close to having no meaning because unreflective. Traditional social action is based on habits and customs. Okay. What is a habit? As A.S. Hornby, who writes Oxford Dictionary of English. Okay. For A.S. Hornby, according to A.S. Hornby, a habit is something that an individual has been doing it for a long time usually. In other words, a habit is something that an individual gets accustomed to. Okay. They do not have clearly defined objectives. Okay. Suppose a custom, the way we perform our customs, festivals, marriages, these are important, I am not denying that. But is there a clearly defined objective? For Weber, no. That is why traditional social action is very much based on habits and customs, and hence they are meaningless, they do not have any meaning, and hence unreflective in nature. They are not reflexive, they are not meaningful social action. We are coming to what is meaningful social action for Weber. Why was he emphasizing more and more on meaningful social action? Okay. Then secondly, affective or emotive social action relates to the emotions and is equally seen as often meaningless in these terms. Okay. I mean, affective or emotive social action, which is based on affection, emotion, okay, it becomes unreflective in nature and hence loses its meaning. It becomes meaningless for Weber. Okay. The major distinction of clearly meaningful action then is between the last 2 categories, the value rational and the goal rational. Okay. Value rational action treats action as having a value in itself which is independent from its effect and derives, for example, from more moral, aesthetic or religious criteria. Okay? I mean, when I say, when Weber said value rational, I mean it is based on values which are known as higher ordered norms. If I say speak the truth always, honesty is the best policy, they are values. If I say walk on the left hand side of Indian roads, I mean in Europe people walk on the right hand side of the road. Okay. That is why I said walk on the, I mean this is a rule, this is a rule which is legally bound. Okay. This is a norm, it is well accepted by the citizens, okay, by the passengers. It is also, it has evolved through social acceptance also. It is well accepted. Okay. If I say this, then there is a difference between value and value on the one hand and rule or norm on the other. Then the value rational social action is very much based on values. Honesty is the best policy, I may follow that, I may not follow that. But if I say no, walk on the left hand side of Indian roads, then I am legally bound to follow that. That is a rule, that is not a value. But when I say value, it is very much related to the world of morality, ethics, aesthetics and religious criteria. Okay? For Weber. Okay. Then Weber dwelt upon goal rational social action, okay, which is alternatively known as instrumental rationality. I mean action that is oriented purely towards desired results. Okay. Okay. Action that is purely toward that is oriented purely towards desired results. I mean goal rational social action or instrumental rationality involves a specific goal, objective, aim and so on. And particularly this goal rational social action is associated with Weber's account of modernity, which he sees action as deriving, which he sees as which he sees action as deriving its sole meaning and interest from its results to dominate all contemporary society. I mean which he sees, if I have to say, I mean goal oriented social action or goal rational social action, alternatively known as instrumental rationality, okay, is oriented purely towards desired results, which is particularly associated with Weber's account of modernity, which Weber sees as a progressive extension of this principle of instrumental rationality, which sees action as deriving its sole meaning and interest from its results to dominate all contemporary society. Okay? For Weber, the history of modernity is the history of the progressive orientation of all social action, in all contexts to instrumental rationality. And this rationalization of social life involves an ever greater development of technical means and a progressive orientation of the ends towards which these means are supposed to lead. For example, Weber argues in the Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism that Calvinist and dissenting religion represented a rationalization of human behavior, which focused people's constant attention on the relationship between their everyday activity and their hope of salvation. All behavior was scrutinized to see whether or not it represented a waste of time and thus possibly an indication that one was not destined for salvation. And such obsession with making the most of each minute with the rationalization of everyday life, particularly economic life, gradually came to take complete precedence over the intended goal, intended aim, intended desired result, ambition of demonstrating to oneself that one was likely to be destined for salvation. Okay? I mean Weber's analysis of the development of bureaucracy again is similar. Bureaucracy for Weber is simply the most technically efficient means of organizing the action of a state. Bureaucracy again is a modern phenomenon. Okay? Bureaucracy in capitalism is a modern phenomenon. Okay? Thus, it does not imply that other forms of bureaucracy did not exist earlier in the pre-capitalist social formation. They were there, but bureaucracy in capitalism again is different. Bureaucratic means of organization come to predominate in modern societies irrespective of the actual goals which they are supposed to serve. Increasingly, okay, it implies that increasingly bureaucracy takes on a life and a logic of its own that renders its ultimate goal irrelevant. In Weber's terminology, formal rationality, the instrumental rationality of a particular form leads to substantive rationality. Okay? Ends determine the means. Our objectives will determine what will be the possible methods that we are going to undertake. Okay? This is very important. Okay. Then, if in Weber's terminology that formal rationality, the instrumental rationality of a particular form leads to substantive rationality, a content which is in fact derived from the form and not from the goal that the formal rationality is supposed to serve. Okay. Capitalism itself is a very important instance of this general rationalization of behavior that characterizes modern society. Weber defines it in terms of the rationalization of the pursuit of profit. In Economy and Society, if you look at Weber's exposition of such arguments, that how he defines rationalization, this rationalization of general rationalization of behavior that characterizes modern society in terms of the rationalization of the pursuit of profit. A rationalization which ultimately implies that the individuals to whom this profit is accruing are not in a position to enjoy its possession, but must rationalize their own lives, replacing an aristocratic lifestyle based effectively on the service of profit rather than its enjoyment. Once again, okay, if this is so, then once again the means becomes the end. Weber's account of modernity as the progressive extension of rationalization, okay, and his skepticism about the possibility of reversing this trend makes this view of modernity at least effectively a holistic one. Okay. In holism or totality, what we discussed, Weber is not a straightforward holist, but through the lens of rationality, okay, Weber's account of modernity as the progressive extension of rationalization and Weber's skepticism about the possibility of reversing this trend makes his view of modernity at least effectively a holistic one. Okay. Then let us quickly browse what we have discussed today. Okay. We started with Weber's interpretation of modernity through the lenses of holism or totality on the one hand and rationality on the other. Okay. Weber is or rather became a sociologist because he is living and working as an academic at the point where sociology is developing as a separate discipline. Indeed, Weber moves from the study of law, political economy and history to an identity as a sociologist. And such shift has important consequences. Weber sets out to define sociology as different from other disciplines within humanities and social sciences and restricts its scope and ambit, at least in theory, and which compels the reader, compels us not to describe him as a holist. Okay? There are a number of steps that we have discussed in this narrowing of the jurisdiction of sociology, of the scope and ambit of sociology. I mean, the way Weber treats individuals as primary rather than relationships between individuals, and a consequence of this is that these relationships depend on active construction, that they do not necessarily apply globally, and that even where they do apply, they can best be described in terms of the probability that the relationship or process in question will apply in a particular case. And we have also discussed how Weber restricts the scope of sociology as a discipline to the study of meaningful social action in terms of value rational social action and goal rational social action. Goal rational social action is alternatively known as instrumental rationality. Okay? That in this case, we as Weber restricted the scope of sociology to the study of only meaningful social action, Weber is not a straightforward holist. Okay? But in the case of rationality, through the lens of rationality, we have learnt how Weber's explanations are holistic in nature. Okay? We have discussed in rationality that there is a tension between the statement that we start from individuals rather than relationships, and the statement that we are interested in is the way those individuals orient their action to each other, in other words their interaction. The effect of this becomes clear when we consider the second element of Weber's definition of sociology, that it is not just about social action, but about meaningful social action. Then we have discussed the way Weber developed a categorization of the types of meaning which can be attached to social action, thereby he provided a typology of social action, namely 4 types of social action, namely traditional social action, effective social action or emotive social action, value rational social action and goal rational social action. Okay? Out of these 4, for Weber, traditional social action and affective or emotive social action are unreflective in nature, whereas value rational and goal rational social action are reflective in nature, and hence they are meaningful social action. and in fact, Weber emphasizes more on goal rational social action or instrumental rationality. We have also discussed how for Weber the history of modernity is the history of the progressive orientation of all social action in all contexts to instrumental rationality, I mean goal oriented social action. Okay. Then we have discussed how he argues that Calvinist and dissenting religion represented a rationalization of human behavior in the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism. Then we have discussed Weber's analysis of the development of bureaucracy has also contributed to the debates on modernity. Okay. And then we have discussed how capitalism itself is very important of such general rationalization of behavior that characterizes modern society, and Weber defines it in terms of the rationalization of the pursuit of profit, a rationalization which ultimately implies that the individuals to whom this profit is accruing are not in a position to enjoy its possession, but must rationalize their own lives, replacing an aristocratic lifestyle based effectively on the service of profit rather than its enjoyment. Once again the means becomes the end, and Weber's account of modernity as the progressive extension of rationalization and his skepticism about the possibility of reversing this trend makes this view of modernity at least effectively a holistic one. Keeping this in mind, in the next lecture we are going to discuss